All right, this one is fucking weird. Let's do it. Stop motion is about this girl named Ella, and her mother, Suzanne, is this like world renowned stop motion animator. Because of arthritis, Suzanne is no longer able to use her hands, so she forces her daughter Ella to take over her stop motion animating. But she's really like aggressive and abusive towards Ella, and she overworks her. But one day, Suzanne has a stroke that lands her in the hospital, and Ella decides that she wants to finish the stop motion movie that they were working on by herself. So Ella has this boyfriend named Tom, and he recommends that Ella come live with him while her mother is recovering. But instead, Ella decides to go move into this like half-abandoned apartment building so she can finish her film. One day, Ella meets one of the only other people living in this apartment building, which is this little girl. We never get her name. She's just referred to and credited as Little Girl. So she starts asking Ella questions about the film that she's making, and when Ella tells her about it, the little girl tells her that her ideas are boring. And the little girl comes up with this new story. And her story is about a girl who's lost in the woods. And Ella decides to go with this and scraps her original idea. So as she's working on this new idea, the little girl keeps visiting her. And she tells Ella that her figures don't look realistic enough. And she suggests that Ella use this like rotten steak meat to make her figures. And while at first she's hesitant, she ultimately does it, and it actually works. They look more real. So the little girl continues to tell Ella her story, and it kind of unfolds as they go. And she explains that there is this girl lost in the woods, and she's being hunted by this man that we call the Ash Man. So Ella creates this Ash Man, but the little girl once again is not happy with it. And she tells Ella that the Ash Man needs to be made of something dead. And she takes Ella to the forest where they come across the body of a dead fox, and she insists that Ella use that. So Ella is like, absolutely fucking not, and the little girl is like, okay, then I'm not telling you the rest of the story. One night Ella goes to a party and she runs into Tom's sister Polly, and she asks Polly for LSD to help her get rid of this like creative block that she's having so she can finish the story on her own. And she just ends up having these weird hallucinations, including this creepy ass fucking puppet that's talking to her. And later that night, she decides that she's all out of ideas and she's going to use the fox carcass, like the little girl said, and she does. Ella has another hallucination of the Ash Man staring at her through her window, which mirrors a scene from the film. The next morning, Tom finds Ella unconscious in her apartment and asks what happened. And it's at this point that she realizes that the LSD that Polly gave her is still in her pocket, so she didn't do it. She's just having these hallucinations on her own. So it turns out that Polly is also a stop motion animator. I guess this is a common job. And she offers Ella a job at the studio that she's working at. So Ella goes thinking that she's actually going to be animating, but in reality, they just have her making these little clay eyeballs all day. So she's disappointed, but she does it, but eventually she wanders onto the set. And she sees that Polly literally took stills from the film that she's been working on and basically fucking plagiarized it to make this movie. So Ella and Polly get into a fight, and Ella completely destroys the set and gets kicked off. So at this point, we see that Ella is continuing to lose touch with reality. She's hallucinating more and more. Like at one point, she hallucinates that she herself is made of wax like her figures are. So the little girl comes to Ella's apartment again and tells her the next part of the story, which is the next night the Ash Man is going to come in and touch the girl that is hiding. And Ella is like, absolutely not. I don't like that. Instead, the girl is going to get away. But that night, Ella has another hallucination of the Ash Man chasing her. But this time, she actually gets hurt and wakes up in the hospital the next day with an injured leg. So Tom visits her in the hospital and is like, I'm concerned about you. I'm going to destroy your set and your movie. Like, this has gone too far. You are not well. So Ella obviously freaks out and is like, okay, like, I agree, but let me be the one to do it. I'll do it with you. So Tom agrees with this and leaves with the intention of meeting her at her apartment the next day to do that. Meanwhile, while she's in the hospital, Ella learns that her mother has passed away. So the next day, Ella is discharged and she returns to her apartment where she is greeted by the little girl. And Ella is so sick of this little bitch that she fucking strangles her to death. But the moment she does that, the little girl turns up behind her completely unharmed. And the little girl is like, okay, now that you've gotten that out of your system, are you ready to continue the movie? And she tells Ella that the Ash Man has to be made with something that bleeds. So Ella proceeds to rip open the wound that is on her leg and pull out a piece of muscle. This scene is fucking foul. But as she is doing this, Tom and Polly show up. They try to restrain her because she's hurting herself and tell her that they're taking her back to the hospital. But Ella, in an absolute fit of fucking rage, attacks them both. She pushes Tom down the stairs, which immobilizes him, and then she violently offs Polly with a tripod. And then she suffocates Tom. And now she has something that bleeds. And she uses them to create life-size versions of the girl and the Ashman. And then the life-size Ashman comes to life and goes at Ella. The little girl is watching this whole thing terrified, saying that this isn't part of the story, this isn't supposed to happen. So the Ashman continues to stalk towards Ella, where he eventually attacks her and eats her face, which is suddenly made of wax. Ella eventually wakes up from this and she ends up in the forest again. And she sees this cabin that is identical to the one that she had in her film. And when she enters the cabin, she finds the little girl. And the little girl is watching this footage of Ella bleeding to death in her apartment. The little girl watches this intently and tells Ella that she loves her film. And Ella smiles and puts herself in this satin-lined box and closes the lid, and the movie ends.